Well, like everybody, the longer I lay awake, the more my brain starts whirring around.
The pandemic has taken a toll on our sleeping habits. For some, our brain and mental health could be paying the price. And as a result, many can't think clearly, process things, or even solve simple problems due to lack of sleep. But the pandemic isn't the only reason many of us aren't getting our Z's. Ways to fix that coming up now on the Morning Medical Update. Good morning. So glad you are with us on this Monday, May 9th. Thank you for being here with us on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. Coming up today, COVID cases are on the rise, and so are fake at-home test kits. What to look out for. And in just about 15 minutes, Dr. Dana Hawkinson will join us with the latest COVID count and COVID headlines. But first, anxiety and depression, two emotions we might feel if we are not getting enough sleep. Today, it is all about sleep and how to make it count. So get your questions sent in to us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also email us at the Medical News Network. You'll find links to all of those right there on your screen. We begin this morning, though, with a live look at downtown Kansas City, where if you stepped outside today, you noticed it is quite humid. But it's not just the humidity, it's the heat, where the temps this week are going to hover between 90 and 95 degrees, which could break records for this time of year here in the Kansas City area. The rise in temps means you need to keep in mind things like heat stroke, dehydration. Make sure you are downing plenty of water and or sports drinks that provide lots of electrolytes and low sugars. Also try to be in as much cool air as possible so your body can cool itself down. This weather also causes big issues for those who already have breathing problems. Pulmonologist and our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Steve Stites, explains.
The heat itself can put a stress on a patient who has lung disease because they have difficulty breathing, and our ability to breathe in some instances helps affect our heat exchange. Not like sweating, not like convection or wind and other things, but there is some part of that. Plus, it's just it taxes our cardiopulmonary system more.
Stites says if you are at home and you don't have air conditioning, just do things like cool baths, dab yourself with a wet towel, stay in front of a fan just to keep yourself cool as much as possible. Well, how many hours of sleep do you get a night? According to a poll by the Heaven Life blog, about 40% of people in the metro get less than 7 hours of sleep each night. We decided to ask folks if they too fall into that category.
Probably not enough. I think I probably average about 6 hours a night, maybe. Actually, it's the kind of a weird counting sheep thing. I'll sit and close my eyes and just kind of take some deep breaths and count backwards from 60 and see how far I get before I forget what number I was on. And it seems to work sometimes.
Probably like 7 to 8.
Yeah, I'd say 7 to 8 is probably average.
Oh, around 6 to 8. I go to sleep pretty easy, you know. I get up early, so I go to sleep pretty easy.
Not too bad. How much sleep should you, though, be getting tonight? Researchers in Nature Aging reviewed the sleep habits of nearly 500,000 people between the ages of 38 and 73. They found the magic number for people in the middle-aged area or older is 7 hours of night. Researchers say one possible reason that sleep balance is so important is because of deep sleep. They say when you disrupt it, it messes with a key protein in the brain that has been linked to memory problems and dementia. So glad to have joining us this morning sleep specialist Dr. Damien Stevens, who is also a pulmonologist here at the health system. Good morning.
Good morning.
On this Monday, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Stevens, kind of explain that study and talk about that protein factor. What is that?
So there's actually probably even more than one protein that the brain the idea is we think it's been clearing this protein at night while we sleep. And whenever the brain does not get either different stages of sleep, total amount of sleep, or some other things that we can't measure about sleep, and this is adverse proteins that build up or other toxins don't get cleared, that's when we think that may have the consequences of daytime fog, fatigue. There's kind of these both acute and long-term effects. Acutely, and we've all experienced that. You don't sleep that well, you don't feel fully functional the next day, safe to drive, sharp at work, that kind of thing. But there's this other idea of chronic, not necessarily even sleep deprivation, but chronic poor sleep. Is it also occurring on a long-term basis that you're not clearing, the brain's resetting? Like I said, we've looked at this magic time for total sleep for decades now, and it's almost always come out as little as 7 as up to 8 to 9 hours, and we just don't know the exact time length for ideal sleep, but it's probably somewhere between 7 and 8 hours.
So is it too soon to tell how COVID has affected sleep overall? What do you see in
There's
clinic?
Insomnia. By and large, it's insomnia, and it's either patients themselves that are sick, it's family members that are sick, it's the financial consequences, a lost job, worried about family members that may be exposed, children out of school. So with all those by far away is this insomnia and poor sleep, inability to both fall asleep and stay asleep is the most common thing we're seeing.
Could somebody have due to COVID, start having bad sleep habits and this just turn into a lifelong issue that they have?
So we call that the 3 Ps of insomnia, and the idea is kind of this predisposing, patient was never a good sleeper, kind of had a little bit of anxiety or insomnia. Then we have what we call a precipitating event. So that could be a major health issue, a financial issue. Well, now it's COVID for the entire population of the world, so that's the precipitating. Then you get the perpetuating factor. So some patients, can deal with that short term, a week, a month, and then they resolve it. But if they already had some of that predisposing and they start changing their behavior, they start drinking a little bit more to help them sleep, or other behaviors that are counterproductive, and guess what? That prolongs this. Instead of a few nights or a week of bad sleep, it may become months of bad sleep.
I want to talk about sleep apnea because I think this is something that affects a lot more people than we realize. A new study out of Washington University in St. Louis shows the correlation between sleep apnea and traffic accidents in older adults. Let's talk about sleep apnea, who it's affecting. We know it affects you during your sleep, but what about when you're up and about during the day?
The main risk factor for sleep apnea is actually being overweight, but it's not a strong correlation. There's about at least 10-20% of patients that have sleep apnea are actually on completely normal weight. BMI being the main way that we quote, measure weight. We know that's not a perfect predictor, but that's the main parameter we use to predict it. But there's lots of family factors, there's genetic factors, several other factors that weigh into this whole risk for obstructive sleep apnea. As you said, there's a lot of it out there. Many are undiagnosed. There's a lot of patients that spouse, bed partner is complaining to go in, and that patient's reluctant to do any testing to work it up. But the more we look for it, the more we find it.
You talked about it when it's been undiagnosed. So what could people get on CPAP machines? They know they have it. Couple of questions. Can it be reversed? And then what could happen if you don't get it diagnosed and you're just going on with this and on with this?
So the only way to typically reverse sleep apnea is losing weight. And you'll find even some patients that I already mentioned, 10 to 20% are normal weight. So some may have a high BMI and they lose 20, 40 pounds, and yet they still have sleep apnea. So that can be very frustrating. There are some treatment options. We now do basically a pacemaker for the tongue. That's called Inspire hypoglossal nerve stimulator. So that is one other options besides the gold standard, as we say, the CPAP. And by CPAP, what we mean continuous positive airway pressure, and it's basically just a air compressor attached to a hose attached to a mask, and it uses air pressure as kind of a splint for the airway. It avoids the airway from collapsing, closing off, shutting down. It should prevent snoring. So it basically stabilizes the upper airway through compressed air. And that is what we call CPAP. There's a few other things. Oral appliance or a mouthpiece for apnea can be beneficial. So we still do sometimes surgery for the airway itself. Basically, we take the roof of the mouth, the tonsils, other parts, the uvula that hangs down the roof of the mouth, and we do that for some patients, but we don't do that nearly as much as we used to.
Studies have shown that sleep deprivation can lead to nightmares. Is that true?
It can, but there's lots of things that can lead to nightmares. Just mood disorders themselves can lead to nightmares. So there's lots of factors. We don't understand nightmares to a large degree. What are risk factors? What do they mean? Do they have any importance at all? But even medications can actually lead to nightmares also.
Explain do you know the difference between night terrors and nightmares? Because my daughter has severe night terrors, and I don't know if that's something that parents experience with their children, but when my daughter experienced, it was very frightening for me.
It's typically more traumatizing to the parents because in reality, the vast majority of kids have no recall at all. The classic story is it's a young kid, 2, 3, 4, 5. Most are already outgrowing it by the time they're 8 or 9 years old. And it is literally they awake at night and they almost always are screaming or some other loud noise. Like I said, in the middle of the night, they will be sweaty a lot of times. There's no other thing that's actively going on, no other health, no fever, no other thing, and it just kind of comes out of the blue. And like I said, it quite often can be very traumatizing to the parents, because when you see your child in that much distress, you think there's something that's going on, but the vast majority, they'll go back to bed, lay down, and then you ask in the morning and they have absolutely no recall whatsoever. And that's a sleep terror.
And that's exactly what happened. Their eyes are open, running around often, standing up, talking, telling me things, and you're like, what's going on? But but they were pretty benign.
Yeah.
That's what they were.
Most kids will outgrow them. The vast majority, it's very rare that I've seen an adult that's still having sleep terrors. Vast kids will outgrow them. They are pretty familial. A lot of times you'll hear someone else in a family, a parent, a grandparent, or someone else had night terrors.
But it's so interesting. You know so much about sleep. You are our expert, but it's just, there seems like to be so much mystery still behind sleep and nightmares and all sorts of things.
To a large degree, it's because the field of sleep medicine has really never came about until around the 1980s. You know, as far as the vast majority of diagnosis, the workup, the testing, all that came about within the last 40, 50 years. Whereas all these other areas of medicine have been around for far longer.
All right, I want to get to a community question. Dave wants to know, so and we've heard a couple people off the top talk about how much sleep they were getting, 6 to 8 hours. That seems pretty good. I'm kind of jealous. Wish I could get that every single night. But Dave says, is 8 hours still that standard that we're trying to keep, or does it just vary?
Yeah, it's a lot more variable. And here's the thing. So we try to say, what is the best amount? Well, then you're going to have to define what best means. Mm-hmm. And if you've got a health issue and you may be, and what we find is both ends of this spectrum are probably associated with worse health outcomes. One of the ideas is if you are sleeping poorly, actively, heart failure, some other pulmonary disease, you start sleeping more to kind of catch up on your sleep. So if you're more in that 9 and some are 10 hours sleep, it's because that's reflecting either some active health issue, poor sleep. So what the body's response may be is you sleep more. Then the opposite is that 6, 7 hours, 5 hours sleep, that it may be reflecting that you do have a health issue or some other thing that's going on that's preventing you from getting sleep. But most studies have shown there's this window that more than or less than may be associated with negative health consequences. We just don't know how wide that window is.
Every time you're on, we always get a bunch of questions. So I'm going to hold on to these for a quick second because I want to turn to Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control on this Monday, joining us with our COVID count. How do they look coming out of the weekend?
Yeah, again, still in that single digits, but 9 active infections. But none in the ICU, none on the ventilator, still 11 in that recovery period. So the numbers are holding steady, and really nationally, although we have seen an uptick, it's been a very slow or gradual uptick as far as cases go, but especially more important is hospitalization. So again, I think that's good news so far.
Dr. Hawkinson, we're going to be traveling a lot coming up over the summer, as you know. CDC recommending still wearing a mask on a plane. You agree?
Yeah, absolutely I do. That's a medical public health recommendation. And so I certainly recommend that. Again, I think another part of that is if you are traveling, especially to see family or out of the country, and what if you start to develop symptoms while you're on your plane? Do you have to then miss the rest of your vacation and doing those things? And so wearing the mask, even wearing eye protection on the plane, in the air terminal or any other terminals that you're in, or any other transportation, is going to just reduce your risk of getting infected, developing symptoms, and then of course missing the rest of your vacation.
Exactly. Good tip. Okay, so scientists investigating viral rebound of COVID cases. What have you heard about that?
Yeah. Again, I think we do know, and there was the trials with Paxlovid. We know that occurred with the trials as well. We know that also occurred in people who were taking the drug itself, but also the placebo. And so, unfortunately, also what we're hearing is just more anecdotal reports of this. They are still investigating. We are still trying to understand. People are having a reduction in their symptoms or resolved symptoms and then getting symptoms again later after taking Paxlovid. But it's a very good question. There still are investigations going on, but we should understand that Paxlovid continues to be the first choice if you do get COVID-19. Get tested early. If you're positive, get Paxlovid. This will help, again, reduce your overall chances of going to the hospital and severe disease. And even in those rebound cases that we have seen, again, we don't know the full details, But what I've seen is that none of those patients went on to develop severe disease as well. So you're still better off getting Paxlovid.
All right, Doc Hawk, thanks so much for the update. Well, it is all about sleep on this Monday morning. Dr. Damien Stevens joining us to tell us that we're probably not getting enough of it, right?
By and large, yes.
By and large, yes. Nothing new there. No new
Everyone's
headlines.
different, yes.
Summer months are coming up. The light is out. The temperature. How does temperature and sunlight affect our sleep habits?
Sunlight, by and large, doesn't have a huge effect as long as your bedroom is dark and it's more conducive to actual sleep. So, in fact, some patients will say they sleep better during the summer when they get out into the light because there is some degree of sunlight entraining your body as far as the circadian effects. So whenever you see these patients that live in the far north, Alaska, northern Canada, that really has that 23 hours of darkness, sometimes they will have some difficulty. But sunlight's not probably nearly as much of an effect as the heat. Heat itself, what typically is happening is your body temperature is falling as you fall asleep, and the nadir or the bottom is an hour or two before you wake up in the middle of the night. That's why that was the old teaching about getting to a warm bath, so it heats your body up. You get out of the bath and your body temperature starts dropping, which, like I said, that kind of coincides with going to bed, sleep onset as your body temperature dropping. We've never shown that has a huge beneficial effect. The main thing, I get patients say, spend another $5,000 on a new bed, a new mattress. You want your bedroom dark, quiet, and comfortable. And that's really
device-free.
And device-free, yeah.
So, let's talk about the cool. People blast the air conditioning at night. Does that is it just having just a good regular, what's a good temperature to have your room at night?
It's whatever you're most comfortable
Okay.
at, and I have, like I said, patients that have the temperature control, and now I even have a patient that they have a dual bed temperature control in the bed. That one is set at 80 degrees and the other one's set at 65 degrees. So that's how detailed we're getting. But like I said, it's a comfortable temperature for the patient is the most important thing.
Absolutely. I guess these beds have kind of helped a little bit.
Oh, they've gotten pretty complex, sophisticated.
Yeah. What is revenge sleep?
That one I can't say I've really heard of. Now, some people will use that term that it's kind of, quote, catch-up sleep, or when your body gets sleep deprived, then you will sleep more. But I can't say I've specifically heard that term before.
Yeah, revenge sleep did make me think of, hey, I missed out on the sleep this week, so I'm going to really play catch up.
And I think that would probably be what people are referring to.
Does it work? Does it really work?
There is some benefit of someone being sleep deprived, that you sleep extra if it's been a few days. It depends on what outcome marker you look at. Are you looking at some functional testing, a video game, a number game or something, and then you just sleep deprive that person, then you allow them to sleep, and they do perform better. So there's definitely some effect of, quote, catching up, but we don't know if the body ever completely catches up and if you're repeatedly exposing yourself to that. The similar idea is shift workers, and a lot of studies have shown that people that do shift work chronically may not live as long as people that don't do shift work. But there's a pretty big bias in it also. People that may gravitate to certain shifts, is there already some other health issue or some other reason?
That just kind of naturally fits their body.
Exactly.
Let's talk about over-the-counter sleep pills, melatonin, gummies that seem to be working for many people, but what are your thoughts?
They can be beneficial. Here's the whole thing. Melatonin was really never, marketed as a, quote, sleeping pill. It's something your body naturally produces. There are some patients, theoretically would be more beneficial in someone that has no endogenous melatonin, so they're not having the fluctuations, and you replace it. So if it's something your body is already doing and you add an extra dose to it, it's not hugely beneficial. But there are some patients. The big issue with all sleep aids is there's a pretty big placebo effect in it. You could give those patients, so every pill that's marketed now as a prescription, every study it's ever looked at it, you give that person, the group of study subjects, a, quote, placebo, sugar pill, whatever you want to call it, guess what? Everybody sleeps better.
Interesting.
It's the additional benefit of a sleep aid's a little bit more, but that's why it's always hard to tell just how much is the placebo effect versus the actual pill.
Makes sense. Or like with melatonin, what your body's already producing anyway, and you're just trying to push it along. Okay, let's talk about this. Recent study found what's called a sleep molecule. It affects the level of hypocretin.
Yes.
So tell us what that is. This is responsible for making you feel awake during the day and tired at night.
Where this really came out, it was in narcolepsy. So what happens in narcolepsy, they don't have a receptor, and there's a few different other variations, but this is why those patients are fallen asleep, driving during conversations. And so there's even a sleep aid now that's using this same brain chemistry. But there's several different sites within the brain. This is the whole idea of antihistamines, making you sleepy, Benadryl, those kind of aids. So there's lots of ways to target insomnia and helping someone go to sleep. But that's where that research came from, was actually in the narcolepsy field.
Make the correlation between lack of sleep and weight gain.
Once again, that's a very complex kind of catch-22 area. Here's one idea. If you're not sleeping, what are you going to be doing? Well, you may be watching TV, you may be on your phone, but guess what else you have more time for? To
Eating.
eat.
Yep.
So is this simply reflecting more time to eat? And what humans do when they have more time will sometimes eat. So is it that? Is it boredom? I can't sleep, I'm going to eat. Is it, like I said, you have extra time to eat? Then there's this other idea about metabolism. So does your body change metabolism if you're awake more? So it's very complex. And like I said, it's also this kind of chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
Are you awake, therefore you eat more, then you eat, then you don't sleep because you kind of did eat a little bit more. So, but
And you
there
can
seems
also
to
have
be
other
some
things
correlation.
going on with your health, and everybody's
Exactly.
body's different, so who knows, right? Let's talk about napping. I'm a napper. I love a good nap. I'm like a baby. I can sleep on command. So talk about that, especially with people working from home more. What's good and bad about those quick 20-minute doze-offs?
There's probably a benefit to that in the vast majority of people. The main patients that I talk about either not napping or minimizing napping are ones that have insomnia, because what you'll start doing, I only slept 5 hours that last night, so then they lay down after lunch that day and they slept an hour, and oh my God, I felt so good. Well, guess what? That next night, it's going to take an extra 30 minutes to fall asleep because they took an hour or a 2-hour nap. So those are the main patients where I find napping can be counterproductive, is if you start sleeping during the daytime and there's a complaint. So patients that are sleeping well at night, maybe it's 6 hours a night and a 1-hour nap. I don't have any issue with that, or 7 hours during the day and a 30-minute nap. So I certainly think naps can be beneficial and be very, productive to people, except that setting where if you start napping more during the day and
It screws you up on the back end.
On the back end, and that's whenever it can be counterproductive.
Well, like I said, no surprise. We have a lot of questions coming in for Dr. Stevens. Do we have any reporters on the line today? Okay, we're going to scooch on through this. Okay. Sandy says, I've always heard the best sleep is before midnight, like 10 to 8 is better than 1 to 11. Any truth to that about time of day or best slot of sleep?
About the main difference whenever we talk about sleep architecture, that's your stages of sleep as you are sleeping. The earlier few hours are typically more slow wave sleep, and that's the old term deep sleep, stage 3, stage 4 sleep, slow wave sleep. We've always considered that the reason it's deep, we call it the deep sleep to begin with, is it took a louder tone to wake you up, it took to arouse you was more difficult, so that's the reason it was called deep sleep to begin with. And that can correlate with some functional status more or stronger than just total sleep time. So that's where we came up with this kind of deep sleep or slow wave sleep was the most restorative stage of sleep. In reality, as we get older, we lose that, and someone in their 70s, 80s have almost no slow wave or deep sleep, yet they can still wake up feeling rested. So we're still trying to kind of clarify how important that is. As far as this early versus late, you get a lot of your REM or rapid eye movement sleep in the early morning hours. So let's say you're a standard, 11 to 6 a.m. patient. You're going to be hitting a lot of your slow wave sleep at 1 or 2 in the morning, and by the time 5, 6 a.m., you're getting more of the REM or rapid eye movement sleep. Is that less restorative? Is that less beneficial? It still is sleep, but that's why some people kind of come up with this idea that the earlier sleep is the more beneficial sleep. But once again, that's a lot of variability from patient to patient also.
Sure. So if I'm a light sleeper, so if you're a light sleeper, could you still be in a deep sleep as a light sleeper?
You can still be in slow wave sleep, and we still, are also trying to clarify this light sleepers versus deep sleepers. How different is it? We don't really know for sure how important being a light versus a deep sleeper may be. Like I said, it's probably more your total sleep time and some degree your sleep stages and sleep architecture also.
Okay, Betty wants to know, and it's a dream question. I seem to dream every night. Some I remember, others not. Why is this? I could literally, I think I told you this once, I could dream, get up and go to the bathroom and come back, and I totally forgot what I was like, that was a great dream. And then I can come back and go, I have no idea what I just was thinking about. Why is that?
Dream, we call it kind of the last, unknown of sleep, because there's probably been the least research into that area about sleep. What is even a functional dream? We really have no idea to this day. There's everything from it's a way to deal with psychological trauma. There's a little bit of research that's looking at dreaming and depression, and if you dream or have a life trauma and you work through that in your dreams, do you, recover sooner? But all this is more theoretical than proven at this point. Even like who recalls dreams, and I've seen patients that are 60 years old and they've never recalled a dream in their life, but you do a sleep study and they're having REM sleep, where that's the most strongly stage of sleep associated with dreaming. And we just don't know why some recall all night and some never recall. There's a few studies that have looked at, if you want to start recalling your dream, the most effective way is start keeping a journal. Literally have a paper and a pen next to your phone, and you can type it on your phone, but we like to avoid phones at night. But paper and pen, and if you start writing and logging your dreams and truly keep a diary, a sleep diary, patients will start recalling more.
What I hear you saying is that we may just never know, right? When it comes to dreams,
we may never know, but we're getting more into, there's even some studies that have looked at stroke patients. So how do dreams change post-stroke? So part of the brain's been damaged, and how does that affect? And it does seem to be some effect after strokes and dreaming, but we're getting brain imaging. So brain imaging will probably be another pretty key factor to knowing more about dreams. What's the role of dreams? And there's still sleep doctors out there that said there's no role at all. It's just like an artifact from early ancestors that doesn't have any functional. But we usually think there's probably some reason that the body doesn't waste functions for no good reason.
It's not
so there may be something.
Not scientific, but I just think they're really cool. They're just really cool to hear about, talk about. We could do a whole show on that. Christy wants to know, if you can get a good night's sleep with Ambien and don't have any side effects, what's the harm in using it every night to sleep? Are there long-term side effects?
That's a huge question that's also still debated within the sleep field. The tough thing about this, could there be long-term changes in brain chemistry when you take chronic sleep aids? And any patient I treat for this kind of condition, the first question is, have they tried to wean the dose? Do they go to as needed instead of every single night? And if they've gone, is our lowest dose effective dose? So we kind of go through this protocol of different things that if they've never tried to wean off, or at least go to as needed. The issue is they'll do studies with several thousand patients, and they'll take, half of them were on a sleep aid and half were not, and they look at 5 years, 10 years outcomes. And quite often studies will show there is either some risk, we already talked about, car accidents and other things, and patients may live shorter, not as healthy, quality of life may be less. But once again, it's like most things in sleep, you've got to select a population. Why does this one group need a sleep aid? There's already health issues, there's a reason they're taking a sleep aid. Versus the patients that are not taking a sleep aid, there's no active health issue and they're sleeping fine. So is it the pill or the fact they're sleeping poorly that is associated with the lower quality of life?
And Ambien is not over the counter.
No,
so
it's
why would
prescription.
someone need Ambien over just maybe an over-the-counter sleep aid?
We just don't know. Like I said, it's the same thing about insomnia. There's a strong familial component to it. There's a higher rate of depression, anxiety in patients that do need sleep aids. But like I said, one of the strongest factors are patient family history. There's genetics of insomnia that we're getting into more now also, but we don't understand just why some patients will need longer term sleep aids than other patients.
I want to ask the rest of Betty's question. She says, my sleep pattern is, she has no problem falling asleep, but wakes up a couple of times between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Anything you can do to stay asleep? We used to divide sleep insomnia into the onset, I can't fall asleep, into maintenance, and that was actually the term for onset insomnia, maintenance insomnia. In reality, we started lumping them together because the risk factors, predictors, all these things for both patterns of insomnia didn't really seem to be any different. With maintenance insomnia, meaning you wake up and can't go back to sleep, is a little more strongly associated with depression and other mood disorders. But once again, we just don't understand why some patients wake up and they have difficulty maintaining that sleep versus others go lay down and they sleep 7 hours and never wake up a single time. One of the first things I set with patients is just normal expectations. Every patient is going to wake up a few times, and some, they almost develop anxiety about waking up, and I'll say, well, did you fall? Yeah, I fell back asleep. Well, how long did it take? Well, I don't know, because maybe 5-10 minutes, but they did that twice that night, and that still may not be pathological. I've got a couple more questions. I promised everyone I would get, because when you're here, I told you we get a lot of them. Joellen wants to know, she says, you got to figure out what's going on. Is it finances, anxiety, kids' health? Do you recommend, Dr. Stevens, people getting some sort of counseling to find out what it is to get to the root to then coincide with the help that you're offering?
Yeah. So that's what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's been around for decades now. It was used a lot for anxiety, for panic, for other depression, and now there's kind of a customized form for insomnia. Yeah, we try to dig into this, like you'd already said, was there a financial, but in reality, you can never pinpoint a specific trigger for many insomnia patients. We will look into that, and the most effective therapy is actually the combination of sleep aid with cognitive behavioral therapy, but cognitive behavioral therapy is probably more effective long-term than sleep aids.
Question from Vicky. How can I convince my husband to get a sleep study? He stops breathing and it scares me to death, she says.
There's adverse consequences of long-term untreated sleep apnea. Everything from, like I said, there's motor vehicle accidents, high blood pressure, just feeling horrible. And talking to other family members, what I found most effective is there a brother, a parent, a son, or someone else in the family that had the diagnosis that started therapy. And because they started therapy, they felt better, they slept better, they never had energy like that. But there's a lot of resistance out there. And the other thing is just what I've already pointed out, there is quite often other treatment options other than just the CPAP.
Vicky wants to know, menopause, is that another issue with sleep for women?
Yes, huge. It's one of the higher rates. The two higher spikes of insomnia in females is postpartum, will be one of the highest rates of insomnia and difficulty with sleep, and the second is around menopause.
Great.
I will have some patients that actually take hormone therapy because even the sleep aids don't seem to work as well with perimenopausal associated insomnia, and I have some that just do that. Is it the hot sweats, the change in hormones, or all that combination? Is it the stress related to that? Is there some other cognitive effects? But yeah, that's one of the second kind of spikes in insomnia in females.
So women can't just catch a break,
They
Dr.
can't catch a
Stevens.
break,
I
no.
guess not. All right, thanks a lot. Okay, Christy wants to know, because this is a big one, it affects all of us, and you know it does. If an electronic book is set to no blue light, is there any harm of reading before bed?
There's probably not.
Okay.
I in reality think that the light exposure related to phones, laptops, readers is probably not nearly as important as the fact that the patient's just not sleeping well and they use that to sleep later. For years we would say reading is okay, but we would try to say read out of bed, because when you're reading in bed, you're teaching your body it's normal to be in bed and be awake.
Right.
So if you're going to read, get up, go to the chair, go to the couch, go to the recliner, read, do whatever, then get back in bed. So when patients are doing that in bed, is it really the device they're using or the fact they're doing it in bed and they're kind of teaching their body it's normal to be in bed and be awake?
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. Melissa wants to know, she's seen more about infrared heat workout facilities. Are you familiar with infrared heat workout facilities, and is that safe? I had never heard of that. But
I have no idea. Dana, do you know? I've not heard of infrared.
Anyone?
There are like hot workouts, hot yoga, all those things. I assume it's
I guess it would be the
something
same
like
idea.
that, where they push the temperature up to like
I said,
99
there's a
or 100.
little bit of literature about even exercise and sleep. The main thing about exercise and sleep is you want to remove it from the bedtime. Some patients will say, I never have any time until 9 o'clock that night, and that's the only time I get a chance to, and then I run home, take a shower, and jump in bed and can't fall asleep for a while. The improvement in insomnia with exercise is not a huge benefit, but there's a little bit of benefit to
Okay,
it.
last question, then I'm going to let you go so you can get to your patients. Kathy wants to know, what about sleep paralysis in adults?
Actually fairly common.
What is
Sleep
that?
paralysis is the idea that you're awake, fully cognizant, you realize you're awake, but you cannot move. It's kind of interesting. It's associated with other sleep disorders. Some patients with obstructive sleep apnea will complain of it. It's most strongly associated with actually narcolepsy. So when you see a patient that may have this, always ask about other questions of sleepiness, but it occurs very commonly in the healthy population. The kind of interesting thing about this is that every society has a description, and it's interesting from China, from Africa, from every other continent, they'll describe sleep paralysis, and a lot of times they'll call it the hag. They'll have a witch sitting on their chest, and if you even talk to some of these older generations, they have these different terms that they call it. And it's always this kind of fear that someone's sitting on their chest, and that's causing the paralysis. And there's even a famous medical illustration from the 1700s, and that's exactly, it's like a devil sitting on the chest, and that is sleep paralysis, but we do not know the physiology or the mechanism of it.
Oh.
But all these different countries will have this description of sleep paralysis, so there's something that we just don't understand of where it comes from. But like I said, it can occur commonly, but it will be quite distressing to patients. Rarely do you have to treat it. Most people, you tell them, hey, that's what it is. There's no adverse consequences, nothing else. But there's been a couple times I've had to treat a patient that it was happening almost every night, and they would wake up and just in a severe panic, because as you can imagine, you wake up and you cannot move. The other interesting thing, they have a bed partner. If they touch them or kind of move them, that will break it. And they will talk about that also, that as someone that's laying next to them will move.
Very interesting.
It's
Dr. Stevens,
kind of an interesting thing.
always great to have you on. Just before we let you go, it's a Monday. We're starting out a new week. What's just your parting advice for us as we head into the week, and good sleep advice?
Regular bedtime, regular wake-up time. Keep your active exercise. Like I said, the bedroom dark, comfortable temperature for you, and don't stress about not sleeping, because that's just going to make it worse.
All right, thank you so much. All right, in headlines this morning, more than 18,000 people are hospitalized in the U.S. with COVID-19. That's an increase of 20% from just 2 weeks ago. The figure includes patients who are in the hospital because they are very ill with COVID-19, as well as those admitted for other reasons who test positive on arrival. Joining me now to talk more about this, of course, is Dr. Hawkinson back with us. And let's start with a study, a couple things that finds that double masking does not work. True or not? I know you've always given your opinion. You're like, I'll take somebody wearing one mask over two. But what is your thoughts on that?
You know, I looked at this article in the paper, but I also looked at the actual article in the journal. I think it's a lot of headline. So first of all, there are quite a bit of caveats to this study. It is mostly all computational models. So they've made these like CGI computer models with the patient heads as well as with the masks. They also talk about the masks themselves. What we should note is that the CDC recommends cloth mask with a surgical mask over that. This takes into account 2 cloth masks. So again, I think that there are quite a few caveats to this study. As far as real world stuff goes, we do understand about the fit, and they do talk about the fit here. But overall, wearing that mask is still going to provide you protection, even if it's just a 2 to 3 layer cloth mask. As we talked about earlier, I think if you are traveling on a bus, train, plane, in those terminals around a lot of people, it's always going to be safer to wear that mask. Or if you need to, just as the CDC recommends, a cloth mask and a surgical mask. I don't believe in that they are recommending 2 cloth masks. The data was about that cloth mask and surgical mask. So.
All right, what about this? Fake versions of FlowFlex and iHealth at-home COVID tests being sold here in the U.S. That's a big warning coming out from the FDA. What concerns should we keep in mind?
You know, we know that these home tests overall can, have false negative results. There can be things, operator error. Now, if you have the test itself, which is fake and could not give you the accurate results, that is one more thing, especially if you're having symptoms and you're planning to travel or going to somebody's house who may be more at risk of severe disease. It is certainly a concern, so it is important to vet out those tests that you do buy.
And then just lastly, a Mayo Clinic doctor saying that new COVID variants evade the vaccine. What do you know about that?
Yeah, I mean, I still believe this is in regards to the antibodies. We know that the antibodies that are created by vaccine and infection, you do have some neutralizing antibodies even to the variants that we've identified so far, but we know that you can still be infected by those variants. But the immune response that is created by the vaccines and or past infection, especially with the T cells, is really what helps protect against hospitalization, severe disease, and death. And again, that's what those vaccines were designed to do. They continue to do that very well, so it remains quite important to be vaccinated and, of course, be up to date with your vaccine as well.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Hawkinson, for those updates. Well, the word nurse means many things to people. It's derived from a Latin word which means to nurture or nourish. The term nurse has become synonymous with caring and compassion, certainly over these last couple of years. This is National Nurses Week, and we honor those in the medical community who have been on the front lines, taking care of all of us since the start of this pandemic. The FDA tweeting this out: "Thank you to all the nurses in the United States and around the world for all that you do to keep us safe every day. We are safer and healthier because of you." And it's not just the FDA thanking nurses, so are some members of the community.
We thank all the COVID warriors, nurses, doctors.
I knew they paid, man, seeing the hospitals get full and people not really caring.
She just happens to be one, so I thank her, maybe not via voice, but I appreciate her every day for what she does and how she takes care of people, including her family. So she's a very important person.
Yes, they are. And before we go, make sure you do not miss open mics on Wednesday, because you will find a beardless and a hairless Dr. Steve Stites. That's because he shaved it all off on Friday night for the Shave to Save event. He's been growing his hair out for the last couple of months. People have been saying how scruffy he looks on air. That was all for a good cause. All those proceeds will go to Hope Lodge, which provides a supportive environment and lodging to cancer patients and their families during treatment who live far away. Dr. Stites managed to raise $32,000 in donations. So we'll see him in all his glory. And I think he's going to grow it back out, because he's got so many women calling in Dr. Hawkinson saying how good he looks. So I don't know. They're like, I really am liking the facial hair. So, all right. So thank you so much for being with us today. Don't forget, you can catch our show anytime by logging on to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Everyone, have a great Monday, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 8. Coming up tomorrow on the Morning Medical Update, I'm Jessica Lovell. Studies found that 1 in 10 people in Kansas City suffer severe mental disorder. A message from one family after losing their son to suicide, and how the foundation in his name is helping others. That's Tuesday at 8 on these social media channels.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.